Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we discuss the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, we have special guests on the show. We're joined by Richard Gregory, who looks after global workplace experience at Avanade. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm really good. Fantastic to be here, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
You're making me feel old now because I remember kind of speaking to you earlier on in my career when you were over at Rentokil.
Oh, killing rats. I tell you, Rentokil, fantastic business for employee experience.
Yeah.
For a company that kills rats and cleans feminine hygiene units, they absolutely nailed the employee experience, the employee value proposition.
Yeah. Also a pretty good brand though, right? Because wherever you go across the UK, you can't miss them. You know, whether you're in the toilet
Pizza
anywhere.
I sniff the air sensors. But yeah, for an organisation that, what was it a few years ago? #1 best place to work. Anyway, we digress. But no, great to be here.
Nice to see you again. Congratulations on everything, all your success since then as well. Tell everyone a little bit more about your role, Avanade, and let's just start with your personal journey actually, and then how that led to where you are now at Avanade.
Yeah, so I've always believed there's been this sweet spot of kind of combining HR with IT. Like, I speak to a lot of HR practitioners. They don't really get digital. They don't really talk the language of IT, and vice versa. You've got a whole bunch of IT people that don't necessarily get the people side. And I've always felt there's this sweet spot in between. So I've personally always tried to position myself with one foot in each camp. And it's been so interesting, Chris, kind of over the last 12 months, because you're starting to see organizations make those same decisions because they've realized that actually having two functional silos that don't really talk, don't collaborate, don't work together maybe isn't the best for the future of work, especially one that's going to be so digitally orientated. And so, for those of you I've never met, I've done a range of roles in HR. At Rentokil, I was global head of HR ops and org effectiveness and looking at different centers of excellence. I spent time in consultancy with KPMG and Accenture. So it's interesting having sat on both sides of the fence and in industry and in consulting, because you kind of get to see everything. And Avanade's a really strange organization because a lot of people haven't heard of them, but actually it's probably one of the best kept secrets. It's a joint venture between Accenture and Microsoft, and you can't get that many or that big of parents. And they've been Microsoft Partner of the Year for about 15-16 years, true innovators in this whole space of kind of combining IT, HR, physical workspace, line of business and coup into kind of this idea and concept of workplace experience. And then COVID's hit, and everyone's thought, oh, that's probably not a bad idea for us to do as an organization.
Yeah. Is that what attracted you then? Obviously, you've mentioned already a few things, but what was it that attracted you about this particular? Was this a role that they created for you, or was this in place?
No, Avanade was always kind of at the leading edge of believing that actually these different functional silos, these different leaders really needed to talk together. And they did some research 2 or 3 years ago, really cutting edge, because we all know the stuff that's out there, that EX drives CX, for example, but it's always been hard for us as HR practitioners to put a financial value on it. But Avanade did some really cutting edge research with some universities that for once actually brought it down to what are the key factors that an organization has to do to drive financial performance, whether that be revenue or cost. So you could actually build a business case and get sign off from a CFO. And they proved that kind of for organizations that mash these functions, mash these capabilities together, they'll outperform their peers by about 122%. And so that vision was exactly, I guess, what I've believed all of my career. And so it was just kind of a natural home to come and try and do that and work with clients to do the same. And then, like we said, COVID's hit, and the markets come behind that. So I guess Avanade for being a hidden gem was probably 2 or 3 years ahead of what's happened over the last 18 months.
Yeah. I suppose it's also interesting for you because you've felt those frustrations firsthand as a HR practitioner, and now you're part of an organization that's solving it, and you're in on the in on the ground, right? Building,
Yeah,
working
well,
with these organizations.
yeah, exactly, Chris. I mean, for me, I've often thought that HR has lagged behind in terms of digital capability. And I've been frustrated myself in terms of wanting to go quicker, further, faster in terms of analytics or behavioral economics and behavioral science, and actually transforming the world of work. And the only real way to do that is to have that engineering, that IT capability. So to have that power of kind of the Microsoft technology behind you, especially with what they're doing at the moment with things like Viva and into employee experience and into the HR space, has just kind of been a dream come true, really.
Yeah, love it. Well, obviously, as an organization that does this, you need to can't just talk the talk. You need to walk the walk. So,
Yep.
how has your own organization adapted to remote or just hybrid work over the last kind of 15 months? I think it's been now.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because our CEO, Pam, is truly a fantastic CEO and very visionary. And whilst you look in the newspaper every day going, someone's going to allow their people to work, I don't know, work from home 2 days a week, oh, revolutionary. Pam and Avanade and the board have always kind of truly believed that, look, if we're paying people to help clients and we're paying people to make some really strategic decisions for our clients, why aren't we empowering them to do the same in the way that they've worked? So to a certain extent, for a workforce like ours that's always had some flexibility and always had, I guess, the luxury of being able to work from different locations, whether that be home or whether that be client site, it hasn't necessarily been a significant shift, because ultimately we've been doing that for years in advance. But even starting to look at some of the insights and the analytics on our own journey, we saw that kind of 25% of our employees were spending more than 1 day a week working extra. They were working a 6-day working week. We saw that kind of cross-team collaboration was dropping by about 30%. Those innovation, those serendipity moments were really not happening. And so Avanade, even for an organization that has worked anywhere, anytime, any device for years, has realized that actually it's needed to do some things. So Pam and the board put in place kind of an alternative work week pilot right at the start of the pandemic to actually learn what's going to be the right way, what are some of the problems that we're going to exhibit in the world of hybrid work, what are some of the initiatives that we're going to have to put in place 12, 18 months ago, to really empower us to work flexibly, get the job done and not burn out. So on a personal level, I kind of take every Friday morning off now, spend a bit of time with the kids, make sure the work gets done. But so it is quite strange to then go into organizations where they're still on this very linear journey of, is it 100% in the office, is it 100% remote, what policies do we need to put in place, what restrictions do we need to put in place? And these are organizations that are brand leaders, yet they don't have the confidence to kind of empower their employees. And of course, it's also not that linear trajectory of home or in the office. It's also the virtual world. You've got things like Microsoft Mesh, Altspace. Who knows what Apple's going to come up with next week in the AR and the XR space? There's whole dimensions now of ways that we can collaborate differently. And Avanade's been leading in all of those, whether it's smart spaces and IoT sensors to optimize the physical space, or having the latest technology in terms of things like Teams for digital, or like you say, XR and AR in virtual space. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can tell by your excitement. So just to be clear for everyone listening, so is the stance that you've taken internally that those decisions are made personally, or is it kind of having a conversation with your line manager and they decide, as opposed to saying, here's a policy, like where everyone kind of, which many people are doing, you come in 2 days a week, which is very generic, kind of doesn't really show a lot of trust.
I've often believed, and I think this is a lot of leading edge organizations, look, we pay people to make the right decisions. 90% of the time they're going to make the right decision. Propose something. Maybe, I don't know, it looks like 2 days a week in the office 1 week, and 3 days a week or 4 days a week another week dependent upon what's going on. I really don't think you can put these rigid boundaries in. You're going to have some flexibility from an employee standpoint, and I guess inflexibility from an employer standpoint. And so that conversation to do the right thing for the individual and for the company is really that relationship you want going on between you and your line manager.
Yeah. Otherwise, we just go back to another version of the one size fits all. It's just a different version.
Yeah.
That's all you've done. It's rather than Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, we've gone, okay, we're going to do Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. However, 2 of those days are going to be in the office. So it does not lead much to the imagination or flexibility or trust.
No, exactly. And as well, to think with, we talk about inclusivity and diversity, and you look at obviously this month and the campaign around Pride, we've realized now we're all individuals. We've realized we've all got own individual competing demands. And let's be honest, as human beings, and as a human being with 2 young kids, those demands change on a daily and a weekly basis.
Yep.
Therefore, how can you possibly come up with something that's so structured? Because what I need to do today is probably going to need to be different from what I do this time next week. So,
everyone bended their lives around to fit that old model.
I hate this term hybrid working. I even hate this term like work from anywhere, anytime, any device.
Yeah.
For me, it's all about just be productive wherever you can be productive. And I guess for us, it's all right because we have that flexibility. I'm mindful that 85% of organizations, especially in the last 85% of employees in most organizations are front lines. I guess we're all sat here being very lucky, because if I think back to like my days at Rentokil, or you think back to our fantastic NHS, for example, they aren't going to have that flexibility. So I guess with power comes great responsibility. That's the phrase, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah. And literally, we obviously were only a small team, but I just kind of sat down with each of the members and said, how do you personally want to work? And they laid it out, and then we kind of aligned that to, obviously there needs to be some flexibility there, of course, for the business as well. And we came to a point where we were both happy, and it was simple as that. And then from there, it's about trust, and obviously having the right technology. We use a pretty cool tool called ClickUp, which allows us to kind of monitor everything and see what's going on, who's working, where we are on different project timelines, stuff like that. It's pretty simple, to be honest. Didn't take, obviously we're a smaller company, so it's a bit easier, but it's scalable in any way, no matter how big the organization.
I think it's that philosophy, isn't it? It's what mindset do you go into it? I mean, one of our old CHROs gave a great analogy. Look, it's having a wide road with high guardrails. Look, there's a whole load of tax implications that would stop me working in Barbados.
Yeah, everyone's like, I can work anywhere. No, you can't. Calm down.
As long as you're clear as to what those guardrails are and make them really high, you can have a pretty wide road in which to drive your own route along.
Yeah.
And look, how many people really go to work not to be the best that they can be?
Yeah,
I think it's
we're punishing the many for the few, right? We used to punish the many for the few outliers, right? We would create these policies, and it's kind of, as I said, punishing the many just because a few people have kind of, bend the rules or haven't, stayed in, just haven't really committed themselves and done that, and that's just not the right way we should be doing it. As well. I know something what we wanted to talk about as well, and I'd love to share with the audiences around nudge theory, the concept of nudge theory. Could you tell us, what is it for people that don't know? And start there.
Look, I've been a big fan of analytics even before it was kind of hot in the HR space for kind of almost 10 years now. And I can remember speaking to a bunch of other CHROs, and they always used to say to me, look, insights are great, but actually the biggest challenge is not the insights bit. It's the turning insights into action at scale across an organization. And you look at anything from, I don't know, that comment I made earlier, Chris, around those serendipity, those water cooler moments, those cross-team collaborations not happening as frequently as they did do in the past. And I have to say, that is going to be one of the challenges if not the major challenge that we face over the next 18 months, is kind of how do you make sure people's organizations networks stay as broad and as vast as they can do to have that collaboration and that innovation. But you take that as just one example there. To try and change the whole way that an organization behaves is a huge task. Look, it's why change management organizations know that they need to do it but never end up investing the money, because to actually make it happen is really difficult, and to make it happen at scale across a number of different things is probably the biggest challenge of our time. I mean, I think it was Gartner before Christmas that did their CEO survey, and the second biggest challenge CEOs identified was, can organizations get their employees to change their behaviors at the pace that the organization needs to move at? And you look at most challenges, especially in this post-COVID world, most of them, 95% of them, all boil back down to, can we get our people to do stuff differently? And that's not to beat them around the head with a stick. That's ultimately back to that. If we believe our role is to help employees be the best that they can be, that ultimately is what it's all about. So I've been a big fan of behavioral economics, behavioral science for a while. This concept that I think it was Richard Thaler wrote a book on this back in 2008 called Nudge: Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth and Happiness. And I guess fundamentally, kind of nudge theory is all about how can you provide indirect encouragement and enablement that you don't have to hit someone around the head. If you just provide them with the right information at the right time and in the right way, they'll ultimately choose to do the right thing. Coming back to what we were discussing about empowering the hybrid work. So the best example I can give is like think about children, right? I guess one way that I can get my children to tidy their room, but probably doesn't work particularly well, is to instruct them and to force them and to lock them in the room until they've tidied it. Or the other way, using kind of nudge theory, is back to the old Mary Poppins. How do you play a room tidying game with the child that encourages them to do something indirectly? Or I can remember a great example that I think the Japanese government did on their tube system, train system, to get the population to be more healthy, was actually draw lines on the ground to have people walk up the stairs or encourage them to walk up the stairs, those indirect arrows, rather than use escalators. Or a lot of us, if you're anything like me, have piled on the COVID pounds over the last 12 months. Kind of the way that typically most of us go about it is kind of counting calories. But actually, if you were to use nudge theory, it would be to use a smaller plate, so you can't fit as much food on. So it's really
like
this
a buffet
indirect way
yeah.
that is not sneaky. It's not Big Brother. It's just providing people with the right information at the right time. And ultimately then, because of the way our brains work, that they'll make the right decision. And we've been using it for years in our own personal lives, and governments. The UK government's got its own behavioral insights team looking at this. They've even used it in science around getting us all to wear masks, and how do you nudge people to have injections. But we've never thought about using this technology in the workplace, and that's what we've started to look at, is how can you take those insights, combine them with great behavioral science, combine them with great data, combine them with technology, and then ultimately just nudge people to be the best that they can be. So back to that serendipity and that water cooler moment, Chris. I guess in the old world, we'd have gone into the office. We knew everyone was in the office. I'd look for the kiosk that would tell me where you're sitting, Chris, and I could go and find you. Well, in this new world where we might not be in the office more than 2 days a week, we might go 2 or 3 weeks before we actually meet. But what happens if I take data from the fact that we collaborate digitally, data from my smart space and my occupancy that tells me that I'm in the office, and then a bit like Tinder for Business, we both swipe right, we both get nudged, and ultimately we go and book that meeting room, or we get that meeting room booked for us, and we collaborate and communicate that we might not have done before.
Yeah. No,
You can tell I'm passionate about it. That was a long, intro, wasn't it?
It helps so much. I have like one of the things I missed, and it was immediately obvious when we went remote, is that I used to really enjoy celebrating the wins for the sales team, like walking over, congratulations, stuff like that. And I didn't even notice once we were remote that that was missing as much. So now I have a tool on my desktop and for every device, to be honest, which sends me nudges to recognize people.
We've all known that, and I can say this as an L&D practitioner. Look, let's be honest. L&D isn't that successful, and it's not that successful because of things like Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve, i.e. we forget so much so quickly unless you reinforce it. And there was something I read the other month that said if you send someone on a training intervention and you don't reinforce that learning in the flow of work, if you measure their productivity 6 months down the line, they are less productive than if you'd never sent them on that training course or that learning intervention in the first place.
Wow.
But if you can reinforce and nudge what they've learned and help them put that into practice after the course or after the learning intervention, because we all hate courses, but they are far more likely to A, remember it, B, stick in their long-term memory, B, actually change their capabilities. Or think about it this way. How many managers and leaders do we end up sending on all of this leadership and management training? I mean, what is it? $4 billion a year is spent globally on leadership and management training. And we know that actually most of that is a waste of time, dare I say it, because actually people don't change their behaviors.
No, you'd much rather have the nudges, right? You'd much rather have the nudges in those moments and to help you, and then you learn on the job while you're doing it.
Augment your managers.
Yes.
You don't have to have them remember everything. You just have to augment them to be. And I guess the danger is, and why I think you've got to be careful in this is, it's got to be based on behavioral science. And it's almost about less is more, because otherwise the example I always give is you end up creating a nag engine. It's a bit like your mobile phone. You get it out.
Oh, you don't want that. And it's stressful. You're like, oh, another one.
100 notifications.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Ignore them because they're not timely. But you think your Apple Watch, it knows how many steps I've taken. It knows me personally. It nudges me to stand up. That's a great example there of nudging in our personal lives. Think about all of those examples you could be using to change behavior in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's more important? Are there particular industries that could benefit more from this?
I don't know. We've been helping clients in a whole range of industries, everything from your knowledge workers and those serendipity, those organizational networks. How do you make people collaborate with people? Or new joiners, how do you nudge them to do the right activities or connect with the right people to make them more effective? All the way down to even retail store employees. How do you nudge them to fill the shelves up with the right information, with the right stock based on geolocation of data, and nudging them to do
so many applications.
Do that. Even a really simple example, non-tech related. Think health and safety. You know those lines. I don't know, think oil and gas plant, or it could be warehouse or anywhere. Think those lines around the outside of a warehouse, because you don't want people crossing the floor and getting run over by a forklift truck. And think of those footprints. Yeah, that is nudge theory in action.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we automatically think indirectly, where do we walk?
And also it's subconscious.
And you've got to be able to throw it into the day-to-day job. The way we've been doing it with people is sticking it into Teams. I mean, most organizations are using Teams. It's a bit like Microsoft's narrative on Viva. You don't want to introduce another application to have to do change management and behavioral change on your change management or your behavioral intervention. Or a lot of people have been looking at kind of sending nudges through emails. Well, not being funny, less than 25% of emails are ever read or actioned. So that's a complete and utter waste of time. You've got to be where people are and surface it in their existing platforms. If that's sales, then they'd surface it in their sales systems, like you say, Chris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's really this combination of IT and HR. This for me is a great example of coming together into this future of work to solve some of these problems that we don't even realize are going to be there yet until we kind of are another 12 to 18 months on.
Yeah. Well, that kind of reminds me of a really interesting question that you raised before we went live, when you said, who's going to be leading employee experience, IT
Yeah,
or HR? And that just opened
yeah.
up so much thought in my mind. I'd love to hear your thoughts more on that.
Oh, look, I think the answer to this is organizations starting to combine some of these functions and break down the walls. It's back to that whole philosophy of kind of workplace experience, of it being amalgam of IT and HR and line of business and physical workplace teams that need to come together to solve this. So I don't know, does the future look like HR gets combined with IT, gets combined with other functions into an Uber function like a GBS or something, hopefully a global business services, or hopefully something a little bit more exciting and sexy than that? Or do you actually pull your people together into an employee experience or a workplace experience function that takes the best and tries to solve this outside of the functions? I mean, we're seeing a number of organizations and helping a number of organizations with different org structures for this. But fundamentally, I think employee experience, I guess, because the label employee should be, or people, because of course you've got contractors and consultants
Mm-hmm.
and the gig economy, so it's not just employees. But you would think with it being employee in the title, it should sit within HR. But I think the sad thing is, as we've known, a lot of HR functions have only thought about employee experience from one dimension, that employee life cycle, or I don't know, how do you make your holiday booking process great? And that's so limited in thinking that I think it's had such a limited impact that functions like IT have come along, and I guess with the digital capabilities that are now available, are probably in a better position to impact the overall employee experience than HR are. So I guess it's whichever function is going to win out as the one that's most progressive and is capable of thinking bigger than kind of just their remit. I would love it to be HR, because I guess with those 2 feet, I'm probably sat more on the HR side of the fence.
Yeah.
But in reality, I'm seeing more IT departments make more success in this space than HR, sadly.
Yeah. And what we also spoke about before, we're seeing these new roles
Yeah.
emerge, aren't we? I've certainly started seeing it, kind of VP, head of workplace experience, or or head of, even I've even seen head of like hybrid and flex work
Yep.
and all sorts of weird and wonderful job titles emerge. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah. I saw one last night. I think it's Legal in General have just got JD out at the moment for head of workplace experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, head of
There's
workplace
a
experience,
bank in
common one.
Europe I'm working with that have combined HR and IT and physical workplace into a function called workplace experience that actually reports into the COO. And okay, isn't experts and aren't pretending to be experts in reward. That's still sitting within the chief CHRO, the HR remit. But in terms of this approach to a holistic employee experience, yeah, I don't think it can be owned by one function. I think you have got to split them out. I'm not sure I'm convinced by this whole head of hybrid work roles, because I think that's only one part of the
You're right.
part of the workforce, and it needs to be a little bit more inclusive than that. But I think this is the future,
Mm-hmm.
undoubtedly.
What are the main questions when companies are going through this transition right now? What are the main questions they're coming to you with, or biggest challenges? They help me, Richard.
Yeah.
This is
How many days should I tell my employees to be in the office?
that is, you're laughing, but you're being deadly serious at the same time. You wish you was joking, but that's exactly what it is. So, yeah.
Look, I think some of it is, look, how do we provide guidance? How do we actually nudge people as to use the right technologies and the right locations and the right things for the right? I mean, I laugh and joke with clients, but a lot of them are enabling like smart offices, bringing in IoT devices to really get an understanding of what's going on within their physical workplace, which I guess is the first time in probably 10 years that there's been a business case to do that. But as I laugh and joke with clients, it's a bit like you stick in a new IT system. Just because you stick in a new, I don't know, collaborative area within the office, or a new, I don't know, Microsoft Surface Hub, or just because you say people can work from home 2 days a week, it doesn't mean that they know how to do that successfully. It doesn't mean that they know how to change their behaviors. We all talk about being more agile. just because you say the words and you go, be more agile, doesn't change people's behavior. And so it does all come back down to this. How are you going to change people's behaviors to maximize the investments that you're going to make and do so at scale across an organization? I think that is probably the challenge that kind of those leading clients at the moment have answered the question months ago around what are they going to do around how many peak days in the office and what are they going to do with their office space. The real leaders are now starting to understand what are going to be the challenges and how are we going to start to actively solve and change people's behaviors to deal with those challenges. Because let's be honest, none of us have ever been in a situation like this before.
That's what I was about to say. That's all we've ever known is what we've been.
Yeah.
Don't know anything
Even
different.
organizations like Avanade, who ultimately have worked in a non-office environment and haven't been in the office 5 days a week beforehand, the way that we interact with our clients, with partners, it's not going to be the same. Or organizations are going to have to be able to roll with the punches, because stuff's going to come up that none of us have even got foresight on yet. And unless you're agile and able to have a function that mashes all of these different challenges, solutions, functional areas together to solve them, this could be an unmitigated failure.
Yeah.
Could be a disaster.
I was about to ask you, what would be the impact, do you think, of companies that don't get this right?
I think you'll see, what is it at the moment? 35, 40% of people looking to move jobs in the next 18 months to 2 years. I think you'll start to hemorrhage your top talent, because I think for organizations that go too far one way, people have got used and excited. I think you and will be looking for that. I think you've got parts of the workforce that haven't got the opportunity to do this, that ultimately their noses are put out of joint and are going to want to move to roles that allow them this type of flexibility. So how are we going to redesign some of those roles that do have to be there physical? Can some of them be, we were laughing and joking before we came on, weren't we, about could you even turn on a video camera now from outside of the office? Do you even need your team in the office to kind of run one of these podcasts? Yeah.
It's incredible.
I think it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun, but you are right. I'm even seeing, I said this so many times now, but I've seen even some of my closest friends and families that before the pandemic would never have even considered alternative career opportunities or looking outside of their organization. But based on the experience they're receiving over the last year, 15 months, whatever it's maybe been, so many of them, to my surprise, have been like, Chris, I'm looking for new roles. You know, if you have anything in mind, let me know. It is in so many different industries, fields, areas. I was like, wow, this is really happening.
And how are you going to onboard people in this new world of work? We're doing some stuff with like VR and XR, and our parent Accenture is. How do you start to do onboarding in a completely virtual environment, so you can have those serendipity moments? It can feel like you're there, but potentially you're collaborating, you're onboarding with people across the globe. Or what about graduates and apprentices? Like there are some real fundamental challenges that we're going to have to step into, because it scares me thinking back to the start of my career, if I wasn't able to learn off people face to face. I think there were some stats that said grads are getting 30% less opportunities to contribute in a virtual environment. Well, I'll tell you what, we as managers are going to need nudging to make sure that we change our behaviors to accommodate and support grads and apprentices in this new way of work. I think genuinely is going to be a huge area for organizations over the next 5 years. And I don't for the life of me believe any organization that thinks it's nailed its strategy now, that strategy is going to be the same in 6 months' time.
To be honest, is there part of you that, Richard, just like, I wouldn't like to be a HR executive right now?
Actually, the opposite, Chris.
Oh, no,
I feel this is almost the pinnacle of my.
Oh, you left at the wrong time.
The last 16 years has kind of all come down to this. How do we merge? How do we talk the language of IT, talk the language of HR, make some of these changes happen? I think it's super exciting. But I tell you what, the organizations or the people that aren't in the right role and aren't able to, I'm having conversations on a daily basis with CEOs who are who are realizing some of the people that they've got in roles at some of the leadership levels just aren't going to be able to cope with this change. They just aren't broad enough in their thinking. So I think it's super exciting, actually.
Yeah. Well, the good news is you're doing it on scale with multiple organizations. You're going to be in a better place. As well.
Yeah, but I come back to it. It's a nice conversation for some of us to be having. I come back to the fantastic work our doctors and nurses and all of those frontline workers on. We can't just think about employee experience for those that are lucky as knowledge workers. There's got to be a reimagining of the employee experience across the spectrum. So what is it that actually we need to do to digitize? I mean, I'm working with an airline company at the moment that might surprise you, because who'd have thought airlines are investing at the moment, but they've gone, look, the moment that matters for us is aeroplane turnaround time. It matters for our customers because everyone wants to get away on time. And it matters for our employees because you've got at the moment pilots, cabin crew, dispatchers, baggage handlers, the toilet cleaners, the ground handlers, the fuel people, all collaborating with bits of paper, separate walkie-talkies, running up and down the stairs. They're going, look, this is a real opportunity to transform that experience that has a direct impact on the employee experience of our frontline, demonstrates a direct impact on customer experience. And you know what? If we can stop an aeroplane sitting around on the tarmac for 10 minutes, that's immediately $5,000 that we're going to save. So I think for those cutting edge organizations that are truly experience dominated and don't just look at this about being, how do we make some nice HR decisions, but think about it from a true business transformation standpoint, they're going to fly. Good analogy there, flying airlines.
It's a good point to wrap it up there. But there's so much that I think we can. What we've got to do at some point, Richard, is definitely get a group of our network together, some of the CHROs, some of the leaders, and have this debate. We're already having it at some of our summits, but I'd love to get you involved in some of those conversations.
And back to that, hey, who's going to own EX? Is it IT or HR? Who knows what Microsoft's going to do? They've already done Viva. If they start going more into the HR space, they're natural bedfellows with IT.
And I love your comment early as well, made me laugh as well, but you are right with Teams. It is almost a Trojan horse. Getting everyone hooked on Teams. It is perfect because now, and obviously we're seeing them invest heavily in this space, which makes complete sense. You
can see my background. It's #1 conversation at the moment. Yeah,
100%. Parting piece of advice, if there's we've covered so much in this conversation, if there's one thing you want people to walk away with, think about, what would that be? And also where can people connect with you if they want to reach out to you personally and say hello?
Yeah, so by all means connect on LinkedIn. I love to have wide ranging discussions because I don't think any of us know what the answer is, and I think that probably is the one parting piece of advice is I love Apple's whole philosophy of think different, but do we genuinely, if we sit back and are we truly thinking about this and the challenges we've got differently, and how can we start with a blank piece of paper and go, let's forget all of the rules and all of the culture and all of the things that, what would we do if we were starting out as a startup? Because that almost is the mindset that we need to go into to push the boundaries from a HR, from an IT, from a workplace standpoint to deal with some of these big challenges. If we go in with the mindset of why not? Let's go and do something. Give me a really good reason why we wouldn't completely and utterly allow everyone to work from home 5 days a week, and start with that standpoint. Than the standpoint a lot of organizations are starting with, which is, well, how do we tweak around the edges and how do we allow people to work from home 1 day a week? I think we will transform our organizations, but I think society and kind of life in general a lot quicker. I mean, that is the future of work is what we want to make it. Yeah.
Or literally our tagline of HR leaders is shaping the future of work for employees and society, because I feel like it's one in the same. And we've seen the impact.
What a way to end, Chris. that is what our role's got to be.
100%. And so for everyone listening, make sure you go and connect with Richard on LinkedIn. You're going to get a lot of requests now, so don't blame me in advance.
We'll let the algorithms work their magic.
And genuinely, it's really nice speaking to you. Obviously, I spoke to you really early on in my career as well, when I just kind of got into the space, and it's been really cool to follow your journey to where you are now. And clearly, the conversation, the passion that comes across is really aligned with your purpose, your why. So it's great to see you in this space as well.
And likewise to you, Chris. I think it's great what you're doing. And again, it feels completely different, doesn't it? Having a proper conversation like this.
We couldn't have these
if only we could be there with our nudge. You can't see, but the water bottle even has nudge theory into it. It nudges me if I've not drunk enough. We'll all be together again sometime soon.
We'll make it happen.
Let's have this as the first of many conversations.
100%.
Or the second of many.
The second of many, 100%. Well, look, enjoy the rest of the day. I look forward to chatting again soon. And thanks again. See ya.
Keep safe.
Bye.